I actually think that investors and VCs really should look at as an important aspect of investments because this is a huge reason for failure.
Are entrepreneurs addicted to stress? Is there something, I guess, wrong with us?
I know how close excitement or anticipation is to stress. For entrepreneurs, we're always on the verge between the two.
Go on, tell me, how can you rip apart a business model at the early stage?
Yeah, that's a little passion of mine. So I have been known to be a little bit of a sort of startup idea killer, but because we want successful startups.
How much of the world is willing to do something about it?
I've had so much stuff to work through, and I'm a different person for it. And I'm so grateful for my younger self.
Welcome to Secret Leaders. Today I'm joined by Anna Gudmundson, the co-founder and CEO of Sensate. Started in a Harley Street clinic, the original Sensate device was used to treat PTSD patients. Sensate's goal is to enhance stress resilience and improve overall well-being. They've got users in over 50 countries, and in April this year, they raised $3.2 million in seed funding, aiming to serve the estimated 75% of people who are stressed worldwide. I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this, you might be able to relate to that. It's a mission I'm also passionate about, so I'm looking forward to this conversation. Anna, welcome to Secret Leaders.
Thank you so much. I'm a big fan. It's great to be here.
Okay, look, first question. Why do you care about stress?
Right, for me, it really is a root cause of so many issues that we're having in the world, and I see really far beyond the suffering that we individually might have. We might not feel great from stress, but it's so much more that is happening. So when we're activating the stress response in the body, what happens in the nervous system is that we suppress functions that take a lot of energy in order to fight or flight. That's how the stress response has evolved. And so that includes suppressing the immune system, which is obviously extremely important. And that's also why continuous or frequent stress leads directly to physical disease at some point, very often. But we also suppress digestive functions, reproductive function, and the connection to our prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is where we have our conscious mind, our executive functions, our problem solving, also our empathy. So if a vast portion of the population continuously activate the stress response, no other systems work. We need a lot of people in the world that are able to solve our problems. And so a population with just a lot of stressed people is not really going to be function the way we need society to function. So it's really deep empathy for the individual, both from the suffering from actual stress and anxiety and what that does to us, on a mental level, then also on a physical level, but really for me as well, what it does on a societal level.
Okay, and also, I guess just understanding of our audience is obviously going to be very, very akin to stress because they are typically put in stressful situations, such as being living the consequences of their own life choices in entrepreneurship. So there is a difference between, I guess, bad stress and good stress, though, right? So, the glib way of asking is all stress bad for you? But we both know it isn't. So can you explain the difference between these two?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like sometimes I connect to, because I'm also a certified alchemy breathwork practitioner. And it's really fascinating because we do this quite intense breathing technique, which if you apply stress to it, you hyperventilate. If you apply presence and consciousness to it, you oxygenate the body, detox, and have this expansive, almost like psychedelic experience. So there is it's two very similar things, but so different. And obviously, stress is needed in life. It saves us from things. It activates certain parts for us. And it's also unavoidable. So stress is a part of life. And the pursuit really shouldn't be to avoid stress. It should be to have a healthy way of manage stress, to come back to a safe internal space. And of course it drives us, right? A little bit of stress, and I think I often use it myself. If I feel stress that feels like a negative, destructive feeling, I'm like, I know how close excitement or anticipation is to stress. So I'm like, okay, I'm excited, I'm intrigued, and it's a reframing that is extremely important. But yes, it does very different things in our body, and the negative consequences, etc. So I think for entrepreneurs, we're always on the verge between the two. And it's fine to recognize that. But as I mentioned, it's really not to try to avoid the stressful scenarios. They're important, and especially in entrepreneurship, it's really how do we reframe, find tools and ways to use that energy to our advantage, and then also come back into the sort of rest and relaxation state.
And I've heard this before, and I'm wondering on your take on it. Is stress, are entrepreneurs addicted to stress? Like, are they attracted to, and then even maybe addicted to it? Is there something, I guess, wrong with us?
I ask myself all the time. I think, there is something. Okay, so let's get personal about this. It's obviously, I've had a lot of stress and pressure in my career. Am I addicted to this? And I've looked at it from many different angles. I do a lot of self-introspection. And I think I have a little addiction to to a challenge. And really under that, it's growth. And that is almost beyond me. There is something in me that really wants to grow and learn. And if I don't get that, I'm unhappy. So then I can be more forgiving with myself when I find myself in really stressful situations, because I can say, Anna, you need this, you want this. So then it's not so much self-judgment. I think there can be a negative addiction to it. I think another part is, I can sense I have a huge need to feel alive. And so if things are very mundane and boring, I want to feel connection with people. I want to feel connection with life. And so there are different ways of finding that. I think, definitely that's an aspect where some people go towards alcohol and drugs, party, because that's very exciting and alive. It can be workaholism, but really to sort of find what is below that. And you can find that in a breath work, you can find that in nature, you can find that in so many other things if we pay attention to it. But I think there can be a positive and a negative side to it. And I certainly think that there's a lot of workaholism in our society, which is more a way to not feel or not be present and to cover over and to sort of drown ourselves in something else, not to feel the unmet needs that might be below.
And I'm going to stick with this theme just for a moment because I'm personally so interested in it. I've experienced burnout. And so I don't know whether I'm relating burnout to stress specifically, but to follow through this line of thought, obviously burnout, you hit an extreme and then you can't do anything. Or I should be more specific, I couldn't do anything. And I spent about 3 weeks in bed. I later had really bad COVID and I realized there were very similar experiences on my body, which I was just wiped out one way or another. Just one was a virus and the other was, I guess, psychological. But that's the most similar experience I've ever had, interestingly, burnout and really bad COVID. And I guess ultimately because energy levels were just zero. And I'm wondering, and obviously once you have burnout, then afterwards you're like, God, I never need to let myself get like that again because that's even less productive. And oh my God, I went to the depths of extremity on hustling to do this and now I won't do it anymore. And now I'm going to be much more conscious and aware of everything. And so suddenly you have this miraculous opportunity of awareness and even more self-awareness, and you start to understand your body a little bit better. Now, that's an extreme reality. And as someone who's personally experienced a lot of mental health challenges in my life, some of them come at the point of extreme. And what would be amazing for human beings is to not get to the extreme side before you realize, not to go right off the deep end before you realize that this isn't healthy or I need to change a behavior. But that's also the thing that I'm really interested in about in your understanding of sort of stress and where these borderlines are, because in a way, there's also a good thing about that happening to me, which is that I'll never again kid myself. And I think I meet a lot of people who kid themselves about how stressed they are and how much they're doing and how much they can take. And that they never really necessarily get to the border. And so there's almost this like unhealthy, almost extreme, but actually just continually perpetuating the same behaviors over and over again and sort of wondering why they're not feeling right. It's not really a question in that. I suppose it's just like, what is your perspective on, how to balance this, barrier between extremity and living with something that actually isn't healthy. And yeah, how do you get awareness, really, is the question, right? How do you know yourself enough?
Yeah. Well, ever-growing awareness, I think, is a worthwhile pursuit. And I think nothing in the universe is a straight line. And everything happens in seasons or waves or whatnot. And I think the importance is to see that as much as there's sort of a cyclical nature, you're never back in the same place. So I don't think we will have moments where we have this realization we burnt out, then went on a retreat, and now we're in this amazing connected space. We're not going to stay there either, right? And so that's okay that things kind of ebb and flow or move. But I think what's important is to just learn something in every wave, and I think we do actually. But that's a choice. I mean, I think that's where it's a difference between keep making the same mistake and get more bitter and bitter about it every time, which is very possible, and we see that everywhere around us, or really learning from what happened and moving a little bit forward. And it doesn't mean we're not going to have a similar situation sometime again. It's just kind of recognizing that there was a little bit of progress from the time before. There's another thing as well that popped up in my mind when you were talking, which was there is this awareness and volatility graph. And so the more, the lower awareness, the higher the volatility. And this goes in everything. So if we happen to have high volatility in our relationships, we need to increase our relationship volatility. We need to learn about ourselves and relationship and do work in that space. If we have high financial volatility, then we need to increase our financial awareness. So it's this, any area of life where we have high volatility. It could be health. We need to come back closer into our body, get to know our body more. And that I've been on the same journey. So 2 near burnouts, or however you define a burnout, where I also was unable to work, needed to take time out. But such enormous growth, unbelievable what I got out of that. And during those times where I really took to upgrade myself, I mean, they were big upgrades. So, I think, and yeah, there is something that's a little extreme about me. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, take risks, explorer. I've traveled around the world on my own twice. So there's definitely, something there. But I find that just seeing things as a continuum on sort of awareness and volatility, and knowing that you can decrease that volatility if you just grow your awareness is a sort of helpful metaphor.
Okay. And then I guess the reason why I'm asking these questions is, you have a very hard problem to solve in a product space, and I want to get into it. But I guess when I was really, I've got the product. Interestingly, I was at an event a few months ago, and someone was doing an energy healing on me, and then we did some breath work, and then they started talking about Sensate. And this was a very, very experienced person who's someone I really admire and respect. And was like, it's just been incredible, and you need to try it. And was just like, basically your personal salesperson, you'll be delighted to know. And I was like, God, that sounds amazing. Anyway, so I've tried it, and I actually I completely get it. It's really smart, but it's also worth saying that this woman was able to talk to me on a level where in my day job, I run a company and we make probiotics, and they specifically target the vagus nerve, and I write about the vagus nerve, and I'm not a normal consumer. So when someone's talking about this stuff and explains how it works, I'm like, God, yeah, that's genius and makes loads of sense. Whereas your average consumer would be a bit like, what? And I guess the thing that I'm trying to work out is how it's such a big problem. They say 75% of the world is stressed, but how much of the world is willing to do something about it versus just accepting that is life? How do you, as a company, get people to really appreciate this doesn't have to be life, and there is a better way, and that we can do something about it? So I'd just love to know how you go about solving the comms problem, because I'm personally so interested in that. Yeah,
absolutely. So there are kind of 2 things to unpack there. One, which is like the intent from an individual to want to do something about it, and the other one is like, how do we communicate with them? So in general, and this is kind of product / social psychology, it's great when we can move from just avoiding pain to actually moving towards goals. And so very often, and I think just looking at heaps of consumer data in my life, marketing data, whatnot, behavioral data, the vast majority of the population typically primarily away from driven. Then you have a few that have this goals that they're driven towards. And often there's a mix. I'm driven to do this both to get away from something and towards something, but it's very often a sort of away from pain. So that's also the sort of marketing metaphor, the difference between a painkiller and a vitamin. And it's much harder to sell a vitamin than a painkiller.
You're telling me, I know.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
When people use an analogy with me all the time, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'd love to sell painkillers, it's true, but...
Yes, exactly. But that's a shift, right? That's a shift on an individual level and on a global level, to start looking after ourselves, to realize that it's not just, things can be better. And I think when we also have a scenario where so many people are in so much pain, pain, quote unquote, which is stress, overwhelm, anxiety, that is really overwhelming for a lot of people. And I have a lot of empathy for that because I looked at a lot of the data and I understand as well as an entrepreneur. I am in a privileged little clique of people that are, have reasonably high stress resiliency, etc. And I care very deeply about that. So the willingness to do something about it in a natural way is kind of innate. And people genuinely have some intuition. If you need to take antidepressants, you need to take antidepressants, 100%. Like this is not either or, but a lot of people want to do something that is natural to the body and find a way. What's also difficult because there are practices. Exactly. So there are practices. We have breath work, we have meditation, amazing. Both my co-founder Stefan and I are meditators, breath workers. The point is that also human nature, and it's like meeting people, a group of people, here happens to be the mass market, like a huge number of people, where they are, nowhere near meditating. To get into a meditative state, it does take a little bit of practice. It's so worth it. I recommend to everyone to learn to meditate, but if you're actually totally overwhelmed, raging heart rate, thoughts all over the place, it's extremely difficult to get into a meditative state from there to there. And so what Sensate offers is much more an embodied experience, and it's really just tapping into something that the body's known to do for thousands of years. So umming and yoga, if we learn to do this properly, we get the vibration into the chest area. And the chest area is already built to create resonance. And so that's obviously what opera singers project with, etc. So this is not really new. We're using infrasonic waves and sound, which is also like very natural to the body, and it's harmonized. And here we're getting into where I think is a whole new paradigm of science, which I'm very interested in. Obviously, we're mainly water. We know what harmonized frequencies does in terms of patterns, and I've myself studied signal processing back in the day. I'm a total geek. And so it's very natural for me to think of reality as wave and like how we can manipulate. And obviously we're already doing it, but it's kind of a little bit magic, but it's actually extremely powerful. So I'm looking forward to so much more research in this field, which is happening not just for us, but in general. So I call it like, well, you've just explained the product. Put headphones on, you place a little Sensate here, you start a session in the app. The sessions are between 10 and 30 minutes.
Where's here? Imagine that people can't see you. Just give us the proper verbal Sensate experience.
Okay, great. Yes. So this little pebble device, black, that you place on your sternum, on your chest bone. You can either use a lanyard and recline, or you can lie down and just place it on your chest bone.
Which is what I've got. I've got a lanyard with mine, makes it a bit easier.
Yeah. And a lot of people, so many people travel with it as well. So, it depends on whether you're using it at home in bed or in the office or whatnot. You put on your own headphones, you just turn on the device, open an app, it connects automatically, and you start a session. The sessions are between 10 and 30 minutes. You will hear sounds which have particular frequencies, and that sounds like music. It's composed like music. And you will feel the infrasonic frequencies, subaudable frequencies in the chest area, like a purr. And a purr is actually a very relevant word because cat purr is also infrasonic waves. And so I'm really mesmerized by how effective this is. It's obviously my co-founder, Stefan, who's worked decades in integrated healthcare, prominent Harley Street Clinic, New Medicine Group, back when he was doing that. And so I'm really mesmerized. There is something natural that is activated because for me, it's disproportionate how much it really works. And it works not when you already are calm, but also for people just find that relief. And a lot of people use it for sleeping as well, which more than we had anticipated. So in terms of how we communicate, so it's very different. We have people that are using on the whole health continuum, on the wellness continuum, from people that are very sick, a lot of chronic disease. Actually, also apparently long COVID. We're not a medical device. We make no claims in this field, but it's obvious that also the ability to calm the nervous system is going to be extremely important to recover from pretty much anything. We have people that are going through chemo, which is also very stressful, that are using it at that end of illness. To all the way on the other side of the scale, we've got biohackers, health hackers, longevity people that are using it to optimize their HRV and live longer. And good vagal nerve tone, as you might know, is one of the most important things for expanding the health span. But we're really focused on the sort of middle, which is people that just want to find an easy way to relax and manage when they feel stressed and overwhelmed, and also potentially sleep. So it's a different language for the groups.
And talk to me a little bit about then what is happening. So you mentioned frequency, you mentioned waves, you mentioned the vagus nerve. Explain all of this to us. What's really going on?
So what's really going on is the infrasonic waves are spreading through the chest area, and because it's sonic waves, it goes through matter. So that's why it doesn't even need to sit directly on the skin or anything like that. And the sound, which is also sonic waves but hearable, come through the ears. And if we think about it, like, sound waves are really magic. If we put just about two things that vibrate on two sides of a glass of water, nothing happens with the water. We put two transducers with infrasonic waves, you start to see patterns. And if you put those two in harmony, you see this beautiful flowery patterns, right? So it is traveling through the whole body. Now, we know from research that people get more relaxed, right? So we know the outcome. What I can't say is this exactly thing is happening on the vagus nerve, for example, because we haven't done invasive where you actually plant an instrument on the vagus nerve and see that this is exactly the mechanism. But it is also the traditions that have been around for thousands of years. And, but that's I'm making that distinction very deliberately. So what we can see, for example, is that from a very first session, we have a significant decrease in beta brainwaves and a significant increase in theta brainwaves, which means that from a very first session, we are able to move people towards a meditative state. So that's very, very, very exciting. And so those are, things that we can say also other relaxation metrics like lowered heart rate and peripheral skin temperature, respiratory rates, all of those things. But that's very exciting actually to see that we're actually able to shift people towards a meditative state. For me personally, entrepreneur, back to entrepreneurship. And this is not the use case, by the way, but I need to work a lot of hours, right? So in the afternoon, I do a Sensate session. And in the afternoon is when it is the hardest for me to try to meditate, because I'm in the middle of the workday. I have so many thoughts, so many follow-ups, so much going on. To actually quiet my mind is almost impossible at that state. And that's when I do a Sensate. And so then if I'm tired, I will sit up. If I'm not too tired, I will lie down. And it's almost like the thoughts just become some kind of background noise. And I get this nervous system embodied relaxation. And, that's what I think sort of is the difference and why it really helps a lot of people that, perhaps aren't really able to meditate at the stage they're in at that time or in general.
And you say if you're not too tired, you lie down. Is that because you don't want to fall asleep?
Yes.
What happens if you fall asleep? Nothing except for you need to wake up and do your work. Or...
Yes. I do not want to miss my next meeting. That's the main reason. Yes.
What's the difference between a beta and theta brainwave then? What are we trying to optimize with these?
Yeah, no, beta brainwaves is kind of the activity one, so thought, things going on, work, all of that, and the theta brainwaves are much more representing the meditative state. They're obviously, we can go through like all the different brainwaves. It's also actually, we're not even a brain company. Or brainwave company specifically, but obviously everything is one. So the brain and the nervous system is an extension of the brain. So I just mentioned that specifically because it's kind of interesting to move towards a meditative state. But in general, we're focused on the relaxation aspect, and we're not deliberately manipulating. There's no device on the brain or anything like that. It's just showing that the body itself goes towards a more meditative state.
And tell our listeners a little bit about the vagus nerve.
Yes, okay. Yeah, the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It's extremely important. It has a lot of very important functions. It's the sort of information highway between all the organs and the brain. So it goes into the gut, into lungs and heart, and controls a lot of different things that, it's not relevant to Sensate. But what is very relevant to us, it is directly related to the stress response. And so if we see a trigger, here it could be an email. We can sit we're the only species that can sit in a very, very safe space and have suddenly a panic attack, right? Because it's created internally. So we can see something on the news, so we can receive an email or a text message, and we activate the stress response. And that's when all the havoc happens in the body. We get ready to fight or flight. So away goes the immune system, digestive system, all of that, right? In terms of focus functions. And if we have a strong vagal nerve tone, it kind of just hits a little like response, like, hang on a minute, wait, no, let's take a look at this. And so it gives you that micro moment of, am I really gonna react to this? So the people, when there are people someone bumps into them and they, get angry back or shove something back, or it's like, they might not have good balance, or they might not have seen me, or they might not have a good day. All right, didn't change anything for me. So it's that ability to have that space, and having significantly improved my own vagal nerve tone, it's freedom. It's freedom not to be as triggered and, get emails and feel this contraction in the belly, but just sort of be able to, and I mean, hey, I have limits myself as well. It's not like I don't experience stress, but I can definitely notice the increase in ability to stay calm and not have the activation of all the negative aspects of stress. And quite quickly sort of like, all right, okay, what do I need to do about this? And turn towards action and so on. So yeah, the vagus nerve, and then as mentioned, maintain connection to the prefrontal cortex, making good decisions. So when we have activated stress response, we're actually not capable of making good decisions. Another interesting thing is that when we exhaust or disconnect the prefrontal cortex, it also increases all our biases. So, it's just really important for an individual and also for, as I mentioned, the society as a whole.
Yeah, I think you just reminded me of, there's the famous quote from Viktor Frankl, right? Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space, you have a chance to choose how to respond, and in that is freedom.
Exactly, and that's a good vagal nerve tone.
Probably not exactly, but, paraphrasing almost correctly. I guess he's like the forefather of the vagus nerve. Possible to use him in an upcoming ad campaign. If Apple were able to use Einstein, then I can't see why you can't use him. Anyway, I guess the thing that I want to ask about this then, so very often cited, certainly by me, I really deeply feel this, the absolute necessary ingredient for entrepreneurship is resilience. And without it, you are fucked. It's just not going to work because you are going to have a flaky little meltdown nonstop. Now, obviously, entrepreneurship is an amazing way to learn resilience, because I also think, what does that really mean? How does one learn resilience? For most of us in, let's say, first world countries, middle class families and stuff, you have parents who love you, want to protect you, and hopefully make sure that you don't, fall over and hit your head so much, and all of the stuff that's just like normal, privileged, but, everyday first world modern day society behavior. So you're kind of exempt from the everyday opportunities for building resilience quite often. And broadly, this is a very broad statement, but I've thought about this a lot. And there are obviously ways that you can build resilience. For example, you could do an ice bath. There's just like a zillion ways that you can give yourself a hard time and have some discipline and get mentally tough around things. And those are great ways. So is going into entrepreneurship. I've certainly found it's toughened me up a lot, and things that I used to have a meltdown over are just like a casual footnote in my day now. So that's what time and experience will give you. But what I find really interesting about this is it's not so much the resilience that matters necessarily. Really, what you're saying is it is the actual psychological, physiological response you're having to it that matters. What sounds like the Sensate device does is help you shortcut a better response, which is really like, what is the outcome you're trying to do with all this resilience? It's maintain focus and have better decisions, right? It's not let the outside world, control your destiny, and have more agency and control of your inside world and how you're able to respond to every waking moment. I'm sure that's like everyone's desired outcome, and that is a lifetime of hard inner work that people have to do. Actually sounds really interestingly sort of what the Sensate product is trying to work towards, right? Giving you that space. Is that a fair comparison?
Yeah, I think like in terms of just what we're generally trying to do is just provide, what we are doing is providing a really effective tool for people to calm and feel better and more relaxed in the moment. Like that is. And the reason why it's so important that people really do feel calmer is otherwise people don't go back to it. And it's when you continuously practice that you really get the long-term benefits, like with meditation. So any practice that you do when you need it and that gets you back into a state of like reducing. It's not necessarily from feeling horrible to feeling ecstatic, right? But just noticing that, like, okay, the stress went down a few notches, and I can handle this right now. Every time we do that, it's building up. And my co-founder Stefan, who is obviously much more eloquent in these topics than I, he talks about the difference between muscles, which you build, and as soon as you stop going to the gym, they deteriorate. Whereas nerves, actually, when they rewire, they stay that way unless you start to wire them some other way. And it's more like pebbles in a jar. Like at some point
which can work for us and against us, right? Good habits, bad habits.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like it builds up. So personally, if I had a billboard message, like it would be neuroplasticity is real. I have had so much stuff that I had to work through. My parents divorced when I was, in that attachment phase, so under 3 years old, and my personality and fitting into the world, being big personality, female, it's just like I've had so much stuff to work through, and I'm a different person for it, and I'm so grateful for my younger self. Because it's actually not even that hard. I mean, it's like a lifelong journey and so many layers to peel off, but every step is rewarding. Investing in sort of reprogramming. I used to program actual computer code, so it's a very good analogy for me. And I kind of came from that. I'm like, hey, I have a bug in this system. Like this problem keeps coming back, or this feeling keeps coming back, or this scenario is repetitive. And I'm like, okay, how do I fix this? And there are loads of different modalities. But just this kind of, we're not born away and we're like that the rest of our lives. Everything is completely reprogrammable. And it's, not everything, I think there's that core essence of who we are, but our stuff, that's definitely reprogrammable. So yeah, like just a kind of side comment on the encouragement of neuroplasticity is real. And I think any tool works. I mean, there is an abundant market. So I'm like, if breathwork is working for you, fantastic. I have all of the above, right? For me, I use breathwork in the mornings. I use meditation at night. And I need my Sensate in the afternoon because otherwise my prefrontal cortex burn out and I don't have focus in the evenings. So, it's whatever works for people. But I think what we're offering is sort of using the body's own systems to have an effective way to find, that a few notches down on the stress scale.
Have you ever wondered what you'd put in your room 101? The pet peeves you'd want to consign to oblivion. For me, it's, itchy labels on clothes, the ridiculous number of cushions my wife puts on the bed that I have to throw off every night, and bad internet. It's good news then if you're a business in London, because you no longer need to worry about bad internet thanks to our partner, Vorbos. They're able to provide high bandwidth, super reliable business internet because they've built a state-of-the-art fibre network in London from scratch. This means no more fuzzy video calls or your team's productivity being sabotaged by bad internet. They've got a couple of offerings, including one just for startups. It's £350 a month and you get 10 gigabits per second. Most businesses are getting less than 10% of that right now. It's the best on the market. So if you're moving office or just tired of bad internet, head to vorbos.com/secret leaders. That's vorbos.com/secret leaders. There's a link in the description. Yeah, we have a saying at Heights that we use in our marketing, which is you're not stuck with the brain you're born with. Which is a very basic way of saying neuroplasticity is real. Because it really is, right? Anyone can change their life at any given moment. And it's one of the reasons personally that I always encourage people, pick some positive and uplifting people to follow on social media. Find new ideas in books that you both agree with and are interested in and disagree with so that you can learn. Like, all of the stuff is neuroplasticity in action. I think one of the most interesting and enlightening and positive things is knowing that you can create a habit from today or tomorrow, whatever that thing is, and it will literally completely change the direction of your life by changing your brain if you can work at sticking at it. Which is also why don't pick too many habits at once, just pick one. But for me, two of the most impactful habits, when I first learned about neuroplasticity, the two habits that I decided to focus on was trying to read a new book every week, Audible. So read is a bit of a strong word for what I do, but listen. And the second was practice gratitude. And those two things, every single day for, the last maybe 6 or 7 years, I've done the sort of 3 things I'm grateful for. Every week, I'll either listen to a book a week or like on walks or, enough podcasts in between. But the point is learning. And all of those things make me a completely different person 10 years later to who I was 10 years ago. And it's deliberate. I wasn't in a good place. I wanted to be someone that I wasn't. And instead of feeling helpless about it, I understood that I actually could change all of those things. And believing it and doing it creates the change. So yeah, neuroplasticity is absolutely real. That is my plug for neuroplasticity.
And a plug for podcasts.
And a plug for podcasts. Yeah, exactly. Always come to new information.
Inspiring content. Yeah.
Exactly. And also one of my favorite sayings, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So if this message hit you at the right time, then you can thank Anna for teaching you today about both neuroplasticity and the vagus nerve, two of the most incredible parts of human existence, realistically. So let's get back to stress. Why do you care about stress was my first question. Let's talk about the most stressful moment of your life. Is there something that springs to mind when I ask that? Most stressful period. I guess moment is a bit rich, but... So,
as part of my grown-up life that I actually remember, I would say, I was turnaround CEO for a public company in the UK. And in only 18 months, we had, since I took on, restructured, pivoted the company at 80% of revenues in the new market. I think half the losses, almost got rid of all the debt. It was amazing. And then we had issues with a lender and ended up having to sell the company sort of 85% through the journey. That was insanely stressful. And I think it was my biggest growth as a CEO, biggest professional growth, and just having to dig so deep to find my resources. And I definitely felt very lonely at the time. I hadn't really set myself up with coaches and things like that, which I'm a massive fan of, by the way. And in that moment, yeah, it was hardcore. And I remember I was waking up in the morning, and I was finding the energy. I was like unstoppable, just trying to find new ways. And in the end, we actually did a reverse merger with a listed shell, and we sold the platform to an Australian company. So it wasn't by any means like a good exit or anything like that, but we succeeded. But I was waking up, and I just had to reframe every morning. I get to do this, because the overwhelm of impossibilities that was there in the bedroom when I woke up, I was just having to reframe that as I really get to learn, I get to grow, I get to do this. I am becoming a better CEO every moment of this. I am growing my stress resilience, and I think sometimes.
And I chose this. Also, you didn't choose what happened to you, but you chose the role, and that is the role, and it's shit sometimes, we know.
Yeah, don't try to turn around an AIM-listed company, that small cap AIM-listed company. That
you heard it here first, folks.
So yeah, that one was really challenging, and I really had to go very deep in finding internal resources. And I do find sometimes that maybe, well, I forgive all the challenging times, because there is deep growth. There is a lot of growth in those moments. And so it's just kind of seeing that silver lining, which is not always easy when you're in the thick of it. But when you're able to see that when we're doing it, then it really helps with that reshifting and that energy and that positive and that like negative to positive stress.
Okay, so that is an exceptionally stressful period. I can see why you're like, okay, when I'm done with that, maybe I can investigate something slightly different, and I can see how going back to startup life at the earlier stage and Sensate makes sense. So talk to us a little bit about your journey. How did you get into starting Sensate?
Yeah, well, I have to give credit for anything like early days product related to my co-founder, Stefan, who is an amazing human being, and with sort of pioneering integrated healthcare in the UK as well, has really taken in patients that have been to so many doctors and have very complex health conditions, often stress and trauma related, or there is some aspect of stress and trauma in the middle of all these different symptoms. And so he has his whole life had to pioneer into different areas and find ways to successfully heal and help people with his group of elite specialists that they were working with. And what he could see together with his team was that good vagal nerve tone was possibly the silver bullet to recovering from almost anything. Or rather, if you weren't able to manage the stress levels, it would be extremely difficult to recover from almost anything. And what he could also see was very interesting was that prescribing meditation, breath work, mindfulness exercises, people's ability to do that kind of fell off a cliff some 15, 20 years ago. And he needed to find other ways, and he's been a gatekeeper for a lot of different tools and practices and available treatments, and found that the sort of infrasonic treatments on this larger kit, sort of the bed, was really effective. He was using it himself, but he could also see that it was working on patients. And sort of he's got this ability to really see holistically. Like it's very, very unique and make him, I think, a very, very good doctor. And so, just knowing how the body is built, it's like, well, this part of the body is built to create resonance, and the vagus nerve goes through here. It's a good place to activate the vagus nerve, similar to arming. And so we started working on a prototype. And we were introduced, and so for me, I had no intention whatsoever to co-found. I was working as an independent contractor for venture-backed companies at the time, a lot in the product space. did some more restructurings. So I've definitely had a lot of hardcore experiences.
So you were like the bad cop that people would bring in because you've got like a nice smiley face, but then you deliver loads of shit news.
Well, I try to do it with a lot of heart, and actually also, if a company doesn't survive, it's not good for anyone. So it's like when you have to do those things, it's really sort of getting everyone to understand that this isn't a personal thing. This is what's happening in the business. If you talk another hour about that, it's definitely very challenging, and I really care about people. But just shifting the focus from the individual drama to this is a business that needs to survive is sort of really important in that context. But I was very interested. Both, I think Stefan is an amazing person and doing fantastic work, so I wanted to help him. I had other much larger clients in the tech sector, which is my background. And I was also interested in this new paradigm of frequency. So, I, having also, studied math, I actually taught math at university at some point when I was 24, and signal processing and all these things that I mentioned. I think we're starting to understand the waveform. So we've really studied reality as matter for a long time, but really it isn't. Everything is frequency and vibration, and that's also, what Tesla would say. So I think, that was what drew me just an interest, for real life applications of anything that is frequency based. It makes a lot of sense to me. And then I helped him as an advisor to the company, and also a little time on contract startup rate to get the first product to market. And since I'm a data geek, I started like, where's the usage data? And on the sort of typical 90-day line where you have, from apps, for example, you got single-digit retention in the wellness space, typically. And I go back and I'm like, oh, guys, there's something wrong with the usage data here, because it's like 10x industry standard. And they came back to me like, no, this is real. I'm like, what? Because we also sold it with sort of broad messaging on Facebook, right? So we hadn't, this wasn't, some little club that was all into Vegas or anything like that. So that was incredibly fascinating to me, because then I realized, okay, this is potentially a tool for the largest market in the world and the biggest problem. Like this. So I took it very seriously, and it was more like, okay, I need to help Stefan get this off the ground, because this is a product that's needed by so many people, millions and millions of people. And ended up then sort of taking a board director role. And then finally, because he wanted me on board, I'm like, all right, I guess this is what I'm doing. And at that point, really knew Stefan, knew the company, the financial opportunity, as well as the impact we could have. So, it's not the first startup I did, but it was almost reluctantly and really driven by, both Stefan and this incredible product.
I love this story because I think it's more common than we actually know behind the scenes of how companies are founded and co-founded. I think people get very hung up with the idea of co-founder from day one. It's kind of like, I don't know, any successful company you've ever heard of, like at a certain size, most companies just die anyway, and it's all insignificant. Like if you're relatively early, you're early. Like full stop, and certainly early enough to be co-founder, because there's a long way to go if the vision is big and the audience opportunity is large enough. So I actually think it's great to hear the side of the story of someone who is flirting with the founder, professionally, of course, Anna, don't worry, but platonically flirting with the opportunity around them, doing the advisory work, building a relationship, because that is actually like the number one thing where co-founders break up and have the biggest problems. And I think I read somewhere like number one reasons companies fail, other than running out of cash, is co-founders falling out, breaking up, and not being able to resolve their differences. So how do you build trust with a partner long term? Well, don't get into bed with the first one that you meet. Like, try and actually experience what it's like working together. I think just hearing how you've approached it, it sounds like a really good relationship forming, and great opportunity as well to identify each other's weaknesses, right? Even to the point of, you're the CEO. And I'm assuming both of you are able to recognize that that is the sensible thing. But ego is a funny thing, isn't it? So sometimes the founder is like, no, I need to be the CEO because I'm the founder. And you're like, well, yeah, sure, but you'd actually not be a very good one. And can we have that conversation compared to my experience? And I'd love to know how you approach these thorny topics from the beginning.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think because Stefan and I both have done a lot of our own work, and it's this interesting thing in relationships where it's like, okay, we can actually have disputes and really be pretty upset about things, but we know that we're going to come back. It's this trust that, we'll come back. It doesn't matter what happens. Like, we'll come back to each other, and we'll come back in a constructive way, and we'll find a way through it. And I think that's, from our respective relationships that we, may have worked on, but also just like the personal work. Definitely recognize Stefan for the sort of not CEO ego, but I think it's also not like a role that he necessarily wanted to do. And in terms of the co-founder, I think, there wasn't a business, there was a prototype in a clinic. Mm-hmm. And so really kind of what I've come in and done is I've raised all the money. I, doubled revenues year on year. Since we launched in 2019, the hiring, the firing, the hustling. I call him the healer and I'm the hustler. So, I think it's when you know what you're good at and what you want to do, what makes you happy. Taking on that role is not great, but then also a role that isn't aligned is unhelpful. But I think for me, it wasn't even an option because I saw that would not be functioning. Like the way I make decisions around the business and, making sure that we're able to continue focus, not develop 200 products and then have no cash, etc. I mean, it's still obviously extremely, challenging to raise, round after round, but, we've been successful to date, so that's very exciting. As I mentioned, we've actually had twice as much in revenues as we've raised to date. So it's like, that is my space. That is like where I operate, and I can't operate and implement and do my magic if I'm going to try to do that from below somehow, and the decisions about. So that was also just a choice for me. Like then I got other things to do. There are an abundance of opportunities for work as well. So I do think that, yes, it's a good recognition, and I think about that a lot as well. I actually think that investors and VCs really should look at the relationship between the founders as an important aspect of investments, because this is a huge, as you mentioned, reason for failure. And, I feel like both Stefan and I wouldn't say the investment in the relationship is necessarily where it needs to be because we're so damn busy, and, I would say especially myself, but that we sort of have that baseline of sanity and ability to come back to each other and find our internal processes. So not projecting okay, what is it that I didn't hear? What is it that like that whole kind of hygiene, relationship management of our own triggers and our own emotions. But that isn't always there. There's a lot of people that have never even heard those words, never thought about it, and gonna hit their own trigger barriers at some point in a founder relationship, because you are going to go through some seriously stressful times together.
Do you know the story of Roy and Elder Tuvey? Two brothers, they founded a cybersecurity startup called Sensate, which they sold for $200 million. Their next startup, Wandera, went for $400 million. So, if their track record holds up, their latest one is probably going for nigh on $1 billion, and it's called Vibrates. It's a service I've been crying out for. I know my co-founder at Heights, Joel, the more financially literate of us, is going to love it. Vibrates allows you to see what your company is spending on SaaS, all the software you use like Slack, Google, HubSpot, whatever. And here's the kicker. They'll negotiate better deals for you, saving you 20 to 30% a year guaranteed. And they can do the same for your cloud spend too. So, if you want to save money on your SaaS or cloud spend, head to Vibrates.one and use the code SECRETLEADERS. You'll be able to choose between a free benchmark for one of your contracts so you know what you should be paying, or $5,000 off. The code is SECRETLEADERS, that's one word, and there's a link in the description. And yeah, I mean, the irony of the expectation on you to not get overly stressed during really stressful times is almost too much. So the hustler and the healer, absolutely incredible sound of a dynamic duo, by the way, possibly the best. Usually have the operator and thinker or whatever. I love hustler and healer. That's brilliant. As the hustler, what are your biggest blind spots? What are your weaknesses? What are the challenges you have as a leader that you still haven't nailed?
All right, so I think one aspect is just the kind of yin-yang space. As a society, we're all in the yang, and I am too. So I'm constantly just making sure that I spend a little bit more time in the manifestation space. And it's an interesting thing, actually. It's kind of personal, but I can notice when I do how things work. Like, in a way, I'm like, I think I'm a pretty powerful manifester, but like I don't do it because my rational brain doesn't think it makes sense, right? So I do very often get stuck in overdoing. I think I've shifted a lot from my two near burnouts, and it's both my ability to actually enjoy my work when even in the middle of fires, that shifts a lot. But then also to notice, I can feel now after I was actually like sick for a few years, saved by functional medicine. I'm so grateful. Through that process, I really had to come into my body. Now I feel when I'm like, I just shifted into burning adrenaline. Okay, I need to take a break. So just managing that, but it's constant work. It's just like you're talking about habits, and you do them for a bit, and then you fall out. It's okay. You still did them. You still did a little bit of wiring. So you're like, just go back and restart them again. So for me, it's constant work in progress. I can sometimes move too fast, and I have a great connection with the team, and they remind me. So like, hey, what's happening? So I think they're all sort of things that I'm working on, which by that doesn't make them particular blind spots, right? But if they were actual blind spot, I wouldn't know about them. So I guess, there's tons of things that are work in progress. I was just thinking if there was like one major thing, but I think the mostly it is that thing that I just end up going to action when things are, when there's high pressure, I go to action. And for an entrepreneur, that is obviously a great skill. But it does also sometimes mean that I forget to just sit back and be in that space of what is it that I'm trying to manifest here.
You guys, we had the founder of Theragun on, and he came to tell, or Therabody now, and he came to tell the story of how he founded it. And, such a big company now, and so uniquely positioned in the space with copycats and all sorts of things. It was just utterly fascinating to hear true product innovation from a sector expert on a device that's made such a big impact and creates a category where there isn't really a demand. There's the problem, which is pain, but there isn't a product or a problem, so to speak. No one's looking for a hardware product to solve that problem at all. It really reminds me of your journey as well, because his story is very much about category creation. And that's what I think is going on here, right? And you're much earlier in that journey, but what you've fundamentally done is understand something on the scientific side, which is, we're making a drastic difference to people's stress levels by connecting the vagus nerve. And yes, no matter whether you're woo-woo or science, energy and frequency is, really the one constant between the two worlds, right? This is not really disputed. This is just fact. It's physics and spirituality too. So I think there's something really interesting in the category creation side. The question for you is, how are you actually going about manifesting your vision and your success as a category with a physical product like this? And yeah, I want to basically challenge you on the manifestation side to grow a little bit live on our podcast by telling us how you're approaching it. And by the way, if you're a listener and you're rolling your eyes and being like, oh God, manifestation, Dan, shut up. In science, it's called neuroplasticity, and in business, it's just called planning. So it's okay. There's a word for it, no matter where you come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, any sports person will visualize their jump or run or score before, it's like, it's not nothing woo-woo. But yeah, I think there is a sort of early stage in a company, it's always about, okay, that's where we're going. Okay, everyone knows. Okay, now how do we get to the next round? I mean, that's the sort of the sort of setup early stage. So where we're going is really a a lifelong relationship with customers around stress. So it's both a brand, a consumer brand, where we have multiple products and services, but stress comes back in life, but you'll be at different part of the journey. You will need different things at different times. You will have needs during sleepless nights with small kids, deep trauma, etc. So at the moment we have one product, and fortunately it serves, as I mentioned, the whole wellness continuum, but there's so much more we could provide for our customers, so much more support, and they're asking for it, because what's interesting, what we can see, is that because the product works, there's trust. Because I wouldn't put this product into market if it didn't work. I got better things to do. Life is short. So I think, that's the big vision which we're talking about, like how, and also there's much more to that. How do we interact as a company? Already today, really focusing on like how even customer success is much more hand-holding. Really empathy at the core of the business we're dealing with stressed people, and it shifts. So dealing with stressed people from a customer service, customer success perspective can be challenging, right? But just bringing in that empathy, it shifts everything. It's not about them. It's just like, okay, we're dealing with stressed people. We're really helping here. So it's both the suite of products and services and what we offer as this lifelong partner that are, yes, we come here when you have times of stress. And when you don't need us, that's okay. Because we know that you will still be telling friends and family, gifting our products, etc., which you already are, because this is something that comes and goes in life. Near term, so what we're finding, for example, just an example of a sort of new product category is, apart from Harrods in London, we don't do bricks and mortar. So because we allow people to discover the product online, they have the ability to go and research, look at reviews, and see that the vast majority really think the product works. They can watch some videos and sort of find out and discover the product online, and that's much more effective. Once we get to a stage where we have brand awareness and product awareness based on all the digital work that we've done, then it might make sense to have products on the shelf. We are doing a challenging thing, which is reaching that really wide audience, but we are reaching them. And I am so passionate about the fact that we look at our usage data, and a lot of people, the first thing they've done to deal with the stress and anxiety was buy Sensate. So it's not, that they're this geek that have 2,000 devices and they bought another one, but we're really reaching the people that we want to reach. We have near 50% men and women, which is also, fantastic. There's more, stigma in for men talk about stress and anxiety and mental health. Or even to have the awareness that you need help. Possibly, and that's something that we also deeply care about. And I think, there are other ways to reach it. We have a lot of the biohacker, health hackers, alpha male, like Ben Greenfield and all these amazing people who like the product. And so great if they can inspire to deal. They use it for optimization, but it also obviously works for stress and anxiety. So it's just kind of there's a lot of different considerations where it's mixing the mission of what we're trying to achieve with the business strategy. And again, I wouldn't be doing this. I had an opportunity to test out, are we able to sell this product on broad messaging? Are we able to get people to use it before I even took the co-founder on? It was fantastic. And I could talk a long time about how to test out and destroy business models before you raise money, because that's another favorite topic of mine, which I did a bit in consulting. Which
I've got time if you've got time. Please tell us. Honestly, that sounds super interesting, and you are an expert on this. So go on, tell me, how can you rip apart a business model at the early stage? How do we know, for our listeners, how do they know that they're not about to commit to absolute dog shit?
So this is something that it surprises me both sometimes from early stage investors and also entrepreneurs. And I did a bunch of consulting in this field in the past. And so where I start is just like, okay, what assumptions need to be true for this to work? And that will be both obviously understanding a business model. Like in order, if the lowest cost of making this is X and the price is this is my margins, and to get to break even, okay, I need to sell this many products. Like that's just kind of a basic thing. But then also for a person to buy this, what needs to be true? Does there need to be trust? Does there need to be a sense that they're getting a deal? Like what's the dynamic? And then you can test that out. So any type of questionnaires, interviews, any kind of like really low cost, easy customer exploration. And I did it for startup on a budget, right? So because I love psychology and I love user behaviors and I look a lot of this stuff, so I structure what it is I want to test out. And I literally just hired people on Upwork to do market research, give me the data on the markets, do the breakdown, and then like someone that does the customer exploration, which is important. And also questionnaire design is important that you do it right so it's not leading. And I've it's like there's been people that I worked with that had already been backed. And I'm like, guys, it doesn't matter how much you scale. It's not going to break even. There isn't a trust on this side. Here's all the evidence. The expectation on pricing is this. The expectations on, it was a matchmaking platform, for example. It was like a complete mismatch in expectations, both on pricing and service and trust on the two sides. And they ended up canning the whole project. So, sometimes it's, vision and there are many different ways of doing things. But they're always like, but what needs to be true? Like something needs to drive someone to pay for something. It's a need or a want or desire or an insecurity or a belief. But like understanding that and then just finding, okay, am I on the right path? Then, okay, cool, I'll keep going. What next can I test out? But to not even explore that and just have an idea in your head and all your friends are saying, oh, that sounds like a great idea, which always is the case. And not doing any
As is the fact
kind
that they
of
often then
curiosity.
don't even buy it.
Yeah, well, also true. So yeah, that's a little passion of mine. So I have been known to be a little bit of a sort of startup idea killer. But because, we want successful startups. We want entrepreneurship that are, as an entrepreneur as well, to be willing. The my baby problem, right? Like, you have to be willing to let go, to pivot, to change, to, if you're too married to your idea and you don't have that deep sense of curiosity, you can spend a lot of your own time and other people's money and never be successful and your dream never comes to fruition. So, it's from a space of love.
Yeah, there's a strange experience I've had. So I failed a business previously. And so you learn loads from failing. It was high profile. It was embarrassing. It was all the stuff. We raised lots of money. It all went to shit. You learn a lot. And we had a high confidence, right? And lots of hubris. And everyone was telling us we were amazing and lots of users. But it was a terrible business. But great product, but doesn't make a good business. So typical venture-backed reality. And then when I was starting at Heights, people ask lots of questions. And I think they were really surprised how often and how comfortably I would say, I don't know. And the really experienced investors were like, okay, this guy gets it. And the less experienced people were like, this guy's a fucking idiot. He doesn't know the answer to any of the questions. It was a really interesting insight because that stuff is quite flipped. The more experienced you are, both as a founder and an investor, you realize that you don't know all the answers. It's not possible to. You're going to go through a test and learn iteration phase. There are assumptions, and you know that they're assumptions. And the less experienced you are, the more confident you are that your idea is right. And the less experienced the investors are, they're like, great, thank God, finally a guy that gets it. Well, actually, it's not. It's just someone who's really confident. And there's a massive difference because when that confidence hits the market, you get a real hard wake-up call.
Yeah.
So that was one of my experiences. I've learned like the more, and now I'm an investor myself in so many different startups, and I'm love to hear from people that they don't really know. And I'm like, yeah, okay, fair, exactly. Neither do I. I guess we'll learn together. And that's really the process, right? It's like, it's a process. The question that I have for you, which is attached to this, by the way, is it is so terrifying to do that with hardware because it's so hard. I came from a software background myself. So, and Heights, it supplements. It's not hardware like yours is hardware. We can change stuff, but it's a pain in the ass to change stuff. But my pain in the ass will be a fraction of the pain in the ass for you. So, and I know because I've invested in some hardware companies, and you've got to get a lot of assumptions, and you've definitely got to get enough assumptions right. If one too many is off, that hardware is screwed, and the cost is just too high to recover from. So I think that's always fascinating to me about hardware product founders. It's like you've got to be kind of right enough for getting the product out into market and having it not fail and have faults and all of these things that will kill a business. Does that stress you out?
Well, so I don't really
Correct
let
answer,
it stress
nothing
me out.
stresses Anna out, obviously.
Well, yes, but I think, I come from a software background as well, and I've actually worked with hardware a couple of times in the past. But, you can apply agile processes to hardware as well, and you must. So, nowadays it doesn't work the way it used to. You work with partners. First you work with a prototype, small batch partner, and then you iterate a bit there. And then you get a sort of startup style manufacturer that can do small batches. And, you have some returns and field failures in the early days. You need to replace those for the customer, and, there's some cost involved with that. But, you're never going to create a batch of thousands of products until you've iterated on smaller batches. And, nowadays, you don't build a factory. There are amazing partners all over the world that are, experts in manufacturing and, product design and the rest of it. And then there are different levels of complexity. I think for us, the complexity is kind of in the firmware and the whole innovation and what we actually have a patent for, and the fact that we're using vibration is sonic vibration is has some impact, but we're not actually using any insanely unavailable or complex components. So I have to say, I think the sort of hardware is hard is becoming a little bit of a myth, given that the partners you work with, you're not doing it yourself. None of us in the company, know how to run a manufacturing factory. You work with partners that do that all day long. So understanding, you need to have the in-house understanding, obviously, of how to work with them and requirements. But agile man.
Anna, final question, and thank you so much for all your time, by the way. It's been super fascinating for me. Okay, listeners that want to go on a similar journey to you, and that is, creating something new in a category. What is your advice for them?
It's worth it. I think there are different drivers. There is one which is an identity. I want to be an entrepreneur. But if this is something like, it's a little buzz inside, like, I want to do this, I want to get this out, then just absolutely go ahead. And stepping out of the comfort zone is going to feel uncomfortable. This is another of my favorite billboard things, which is, the uncomfort is not a sign that you're on the wrong path. So when we start to get difficult questions, the things are challenging, and we get no, so oh, maybe I'm not supposed to do that. No. It's just because you're out of the comfort zone. And it's like discerning the difference, where it's like, oh, do I have blind spot? Am I not listening? Am I not receiving this feedback? Am I not exploring? Am I not willing to look at, maybe this isn't a viable business? But if it's just damn uncomfortable and challenging, and you still have this inner belief, you got to keep going. And the world needs entrepreneurs to deliver their gifts. That is just an important, deep belief of mine.
World needs more conscious entrepreneurs like you, Anna, and hopefully inspiring others to do the same as well. So thank you so much for joining us on Secret Leaders.
Thank you, Dan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks.